Lawrie Goes Loco is sponsored by the Foxfield Railway.
Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, how about giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to the channel to help us grow and perhaps even check out our Patreon. Today I'm at the Telford Steam Railway to catch up with an old friend. And when I say old, I mean a locomotive that is now in its 100th year, which is something really exciting, but more on that later. As you'll notice, I'm stood on part of the 1 in 40 rolling gradient here at the railway. It drops down there to one station, but also rather confusingly, you can see over there the railway is also kind of-ish level going to the other platform over there. It's built on a Y and it's all a little bit weird, but that doesn't really matter. Welcome to Lawrie Goes Loco. This is a rarity for me here on LMM. Normally when we review a locomotive, it's a first for me to get on it to experience it. Whereas this one, I've had the luxury of crewing it before. I know this engine, I've done volunteer turns on it. And for me, this means it's really exciting because I get to have another go at this. I get to see it again with much more experienced eyes. Since I was last on this, I have crewed so many types of engines. So coming back to this, I thought this was a really good machine, and I'm excited to see that with more experience, if it lives up to the rather lofty expectations I have for it. This is 5619, part of what could be called the ugly duckling of the Great Western Railway, because let's be honest, most stuff that the Great Western made was beautiful, well proportioned, and stunningly well put together. And then you have this. Obviously the memo for the design was missed when this thing came about. There are rumours towards how these things were actually designed, and the story goes that there was a particular head shunt that the engine had to get in, hence this length of the frames and the wheelbase. But the engine that was designed wasn't powerful enough, so Colette went, well, if you don't like that, here's the standard number 2 boiler, it just about fits inside the frames, have that. That will be powerful enough. Now, I don't know if there's any truth to that, but I choose to believe it because I think that's a lovely bit of a designer being spiteful. It is strange, you'll notice that the number 2 boiler does only just fit in those frames. In fact, it is basically parallel with the end of the running board, which means that if you actually want to climb round it, well, you can't. You have to go back through the cab, unlike pretty much every other steam engine in existence that you can walk around the front. No. If you want to put a lamp on the other side, well, you back to the cab, walk around and come around. It's stupid. However, one thing I do really like about this is it is in BR black with the early crest, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is the perfect livery for a Great Western engine. Now, you're free to disagree with me, but you would be wrong, because that is perfection. I love that. With the brass coming through against the black, it is just a work of art. Even with its slightly odd proportions, it's still perfect, and I love it, and I couldn't actually think of a better livery for it. The other thing that these machines do rather emanate is a sense of power. It does look rather the hulking brute, doesn't it? That is certainly an engine that is designed to move stuff. It's not an express engine by any means. That is a workhorse, pure and simple. And that just makes it all the better. The other thing that the observant amongst you may have noticed is that this is rather large. In fact, this is the biggest standard gauge steam locomotive that we are yet to feature on the channel, and that makes me really excited. This is a big step up from the normal industrial locomotives that I bring you. This is a proper Great Western and then British Railway mainline machine. It is a proper tank engine, and that is very exciting. The other thing that you will have noticed as well, and we'll come on to this later, is the fact that it only has the coupling rods on the outside. All the other motion on this is on the inside, but that means it will be awful to prep. Things I do love about it though, I love the sloping tanks, and I love the fact that this smoke box is so huge and it sticks out across the front. It's a weird appearance, but it's something that is instantly recognisable as a Great Western 5600, or as I like to call them, a TAF tank. Now, technically, the TAF tank was the design that came before this, before the Great Western became part of the grouping. But I've always referred to these as TAF tanks, and I will continue to. I love the things that manage to survive into BR ownership, like the copper trim on top of the chimney, and the fact it's still got the brass safety valve bonnet. They're lovely little things which I don't understand how they managed to survive into BR. When British Railways took over a railway still struggling from the efforts of the war, you would have thought that things like that would have just disappeared, but no, the Great Western men were still, even though they were nationalised, they were still having their copper chimney cap and their brass safety valve bonnet, because that's the Great Western way. And of course, as they all had cast number plates, the numbers for the Great Western engines stayed the same. They didn't get changed to a new number with another number added to the front, like the LMS had a 5 added to their number and the LNER got a 6. Because they were cast, they were just left as they were. It was easier just to leave it alone. The first 5600 rolled out of Swindon Works in 1924, so immediately after the grouping, having gone, we don't like all this stuff, it was quite a quick identify and create one of these machines. It weighs 68 tonnes, and of that, there's about 4 tonnes of coal carried in the bunker back there and 1900 imperial gallons of water, which is quite a lot. With the cylinders, which are inside but 18 by 26 inches, and the 4-foot 7.5 inch driving wheels, it developed a tractive effort of 25,800, whatever it is that we actually measure tractive effort in, which is actually quite impressive for a locomotive the size. Having all of the weight on those wheels means that it can put a lot of that down. Some locomotives which don't have pony trucks, like a 044, will be notoriously light-footed. 062, however, pretty sure-footed and designed exactly for hill climbing, where speed isn't really important, but getting the job done is. However, these machines weren't liked by the crews at the time. They argued the machines that they replaced were superior, and also these had the habit of hopping off the rails and developing ground fault, and also the axle boxes were running hot, which was pretty bad. In fact, Collett was called in to explain how he'd managed to make a locomotive that was completely unsuited for the railways that it was meant to operate on, which basically can be put down to being quite a large faux pas. Regardless, however, 100 of these were made. And for Great Western stuff, that's actually a problem, because as it's only a 4-digit number and it's a 5600 class, once you've had 0 and 99, you have to come up with a whole new class. So the 6600s were made. These were slightly different. They were a little bit heavier, and they learnt from some of the mistakes, with I think 50 more being built at Swindon and 50 being built at Armstrong Miller, who changed things on the crank and made it slightly better than the Great Western ones. This was the only 062 that the Great Western Railway built. This design. They didn't do anything else like it. However, once the Welsh enginemen learnt of the 5700 pannier tank, which was slightly smaller but had a very similar tractive effort, they favoured that, so no more of these were built. But the entire class in both the 56 and 6600 variants was 200 engines, which shows what the expected use of these were. Now, most of these were sent and worked in South Wales, working the heavy coal trains, taking wagons up to the mines and then bringing the heavy trains down, where the superior braking of these, bearing in mind that a lot of these trains would have been unfitted, which is a horrific thought, to be charging down the side of a Welsh mountain with God knows how many tons of coal behind you, and the only braking force is the brake van and the locomotive. Because of the riding characteristics, they prefer to operate these coming downhill backwards, because the pony truck would eat up some of the curves and give for smoother riding, which meant that you were then charging uphill a locomotive first, which is aesthetically the correct way to do it. 5619 rolled out of the works in March of 1925, and it is the oldest surviving 5600, and by definition of the 66 as well, because that's just the evolution of this. This one went and worked at Chester, at Leamington, Old Oak Common, yes, and then it went to Reading, spending most of its time hauling empty stock in and out of Paddington, which was entirely not what this thing was designed for. A year later, they realised their mistake and sent it off to Wales, where it spent the rest of its career charging up and down mountains doing what Collett had designed it for. Particularly, it was based around Abercun, running down to Barry Docks. And of course, being in that area, it was sent to Barry Scrapyard in 1964, when steam was decided it wasn't wanted. Of course, being bought by the Wooden Brothers in Barry was this thing's salvation, because, as you probably know, there were huge amounts of engines sat in the scrapyard, which gave preservationists time to go, you know them steam engine things? We'll probably miss them if they've gone, which has been a wonderful boon to preservation. And of course, Barry being in the Great Western area, which is why we have so many Great Western engines in preservation, because that's where they went. The story of this one being saved is a little bit different to most other engines. In 1973, the Telford Development Corporation decided that they wanted a locomotive to put in the shed over there to help tell the story of the area. And that basically, in very layman's terms, spawned a railway. So rather unusually than having a railway and buying a locomotive to run on it, this one spawned a railway, and that is actually rather special. And having it here on the railway that it helped create is really quite important. The railway came about because the thought of having a locomotive sat just over there was too tantalising for local enthusiasts, who managed to persuade the local council that actually they would like this engine to run. And after a slow 7-year restoration, this thing ran here, out into the goods yard, towards the railway. Now, this wasn't the engine that opened the railway, but this did indeed haul trains during the railway's first year, where it was quickly found that this thing that was designed to take wagons up the side of a Welsh mountain was far too big for the fledgling railway. So it went out on hire, and the list is frankly too numerous to say here, but needless to say, it went out and visited many other railways, all the way up to the expiry of its boiler ticket. Another overhaul wasn't immediate, as the group needed to raise funds to pay for it, but eventually in 2008 this thing headed back out and immediately went back out on hire, visiting again many heritage railways until it suffered a failure in 2014 with a cracked tube plate. It was then sent to the flour mill for repair and was recertified at that point, giving it a shiny brand new 10 years of boiler certificate. And then it went back out on hire again, and I have seen it at many different railways, including when I crewed it at the Nene Valley. In 2021 it failed whilst on hire at the Clancoffton Railway, and it then came back here. It came home to get fixed and re-entered service in 2023. It's back home, it's running on the railway it helped start, and I can't think of anything more perfect. And that's it. That's its basic history covered. It's had a very varied life, and frankly I imagine the thing is really happy to be sat back home and be actually operating at the railway it's based at, rather than disappearing off. And with that, well, I suppose we should go and have a look inside the cab.
But first, a word from our sponsor. If you're in the area to visit the Telford Steam Railway, there's another railway not too far away which is well worth a visit.
This is the Foxfield Railway, a 2.5 mile award-winning industrial railway near Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire.
You guys know by now that I've been coming to the Foxfield Railway for years, and 2025 is set to be one of the best years yet. The railway reopens on Mother's Day, where you can get a delicious afternoon tea, which I've had and can definitely vouch for, and then the action-packed War Wheels returns on the 17th and 18th of May, and last year it was absolutely amazing, and this year there's going to be a Spitfire on display as well. And I can exclusively announce that this year the Foxfield Railway is going to be hosting its first ever model railway show and miniature mayhem weekend, and also they offer a cracking driver experience course on a route that's actually pretty fun and challenging. And to help me out here at LMM and to keep up to date with things that are going on at the railway, sign up for the newsletter, remembering to click the "You found us through LMM" to let them know that you found them through me. And with that, on with your regular content.
Welcome to the command centre of 5619, and what a cab it is. The most notable thing compared to many of the industrials that I brought you so far on the channel is that the coal is held over there. We have a proper bunker hidden behind us. The downside of the bunker obviously is that it does somewhat negatively affect the ability to see you that way, because rather than being able to go, there's the buffers, we now have a load of coal. On the plus side, it's not somewhere here getting in the way of your legs, and also there's an awful lot more of it stored over there as well. So that's very positive. This way, we have the familiar sight of a Great Western backhead. Now, the Great Western Railway was big on standardisation, which means that this is basically how the backhead of any Great Western locomotive looks. It's all the same basic thing, which means that theoretically, if you can drive one Western engine, you probably can drive another one, because this will be in the same place. There's none of this getting onto the footplate going, what's all of this? So, having been on this before, this is great for me because I remember this and I know where everything is. You just go, oh yeah, it's all very familiar. There are some bits of it which are less good than others. For instance, using the brake here, if you want to use the brake and look out the side of the cab, see what you're doing, it just doesn't work. You have to be built like an orangutan. There are some positive points, however. The Great Western understood that the driver was an important person, and thus I am stood on a pedestal to really show to the fireman over on your side that I am taller, bigger, and thus more important. And I like that, having this little bit here. It makes me feel more important and yes, special. Visibility looking forward is not too bad. Obviously there is a boiler in the way and it's a relatively long one at that. And of course, as mentioned, any chance of looking at your front buffers and trying to use the brake are, well, limited. However, it is a nice big cab, and in the world of preservation today, where we normally have 3 men on, you have your driver, your fireman and your cleaner, there is enough space on here for all of you to happily get on and not have to be really close friends. This locomotive, being a Great Western machine and being built after the grouping, means it is a modern machine, and it has lots of very nice mod cons. It has working air conditioning up here, and also it's a sunroof. So if you're getting a bit hot, or perhaps you just want to let your hair down and enjoy the breeze coming through, we can open up that and we have light and air. Also, if it's an unpleasant day and the rain's coming in, we can pull these. There are some problems with pulling the side sheet over, and that now means that if I want to look at the side, which is less than ideal. It's also got some genuinely fun and nifty features. Like we have the pockets here and here where you can put timetables and your notes and things. So there's actually some way to put it and it will stay in there. The other thing I do really like about it is over there we have a gauge that shows us how much water is in the tank, which is a useful thing to be able to look at that and go, oh, there is some water in it, or oh, there's none, rather than having to keep getting out and peering and going, can't see water anymore. So that's the basic things. Oh, and the other lovely thing it has is a slacker pipe over there. So that uses the injector steam and water to give you a high pressure hot hose, which means you can clean the floor with. So that's a really, really nifty feature. And I know it's standard fitting on bigger engines, but for me, coming from an industrial background, that's really nice and I really appreciate it. So what do we actually have here? Well, immediately next door to me here, we have the reverser. And you'll notice that there is a pin here, so you can really pull against it to either notch back or put it into reverse, because there is a fair amount of weight down there. Next door to my foot here, we have the cylinder drains, which are wonderful because you do that and they spring forward, and I like the fact that they spring forward. That's a really nice feature. In the middle of all of this, there is the regulator here, and then we have our combination brake on this one here with the ejector, which creates a vacuum here. Up there we have the gauge, which shows us both how much we've actually pulled the brakes off and how much we have in the reservoir, because it's designed to have vacuum. It's got a vacuum reservoir, so there's actually a reserve of vacuum to help balance the brake, which means you can recover it quicker rather than have to wait for the ejector to sit there doing its thing. The blower is here because the blower is very much a driver's control and not a fireman's control. I've never understood why they put it here. It makes far more sense to have it over on the fireman's side, but we'll ignore that. And then we have the sander here. We have working air conditioning here to allow, this is air conditioning on full and this is air conditioning off. Down here we have the hydrostatic lubricator, which very handily says cylinder valves and regulator, and this will feed drops of oil which will then go to the front end of the engine, and you can monitor this by seeing the drops of oil going through, so you know that it's lubricating. These are, just leave them alone, they are magical beasts. Up here we have injector 1 and injector 2, and because it's Great Western we have a whistle and then another whistle, which means we can do things like this. I don't know why more railways didn't fit two-toned whistles and so you can have a tune going on, but I think it's glorious. It just makes me happy. Obviously back in the day this was used that you could have whistle codes and communicate with your guard. Today it's used by idiots like me to make noise and make me smile. Moving across here, because it's a Great Western engine, we have a single gauge frame. Most other engines, in fact every other company known to man, decided that they would have 2 gauges. So if one of them does happen to break, you've got a spare. The Great Western Railway went, no, that's a load of rubbish, and so you have 1 gauge frame and then test cocks here. So if the gauge does fail, you crack these open and you're aiming to get water and steam coming out of both. If there's water and steam dribbling out of that one, you know the water is there. If there's just steam coming out of it, you know it's below there. And as long as there's water and steam coming out of that one, all is well with the world. And if it's not, well then it's time to panic. We have the fire hole door here, and the handle to open these as well. This one is fitted with a flap as well, which is very useful. So you can help control that. And then we have dampers here, the rear damper on the outside and the front damper there. So there are two flaps underneath the firebox, so we can open whichever one is against the direction we're travelling. If we're going backwards, we'll open the front damper to allow more air in. We have the rear sander over here, control for the slacker pipe, which will come on when the injector's on, the handbrake, the aforementioned water gauge over there, and then the water feeds over here. We have more air conditioning at the back to allow airflow in, and the single greatest feature that's ever been added to any locomotive ever, it's got a seat. Seats are fantastic. Also thinking of more cons, this is fitted with steam heat. So this gauge is off for our steam heat, and this one will turn the steam heat on, so we can put some steam down into the carriages to warm the carriages through, which is useful. Finally, up here we have the pressure gauge, and that concludes the cab. It's great, it feels like a proper engine, everything's nicely spaced out, easily recognisable. Great Western standardisation at its best. Everything in its place, and that place is exactly the same on all of them. But in order to get to this stage with it hissing away and getting ready to go, we had to do the prep. And that means that we need to go back in time to this morning when, well, it wasn't very bright. If you're watching this, this means we've successfully travelled back in time to first thing this morning. It is still dark, and we're here on the footplate to start getting this thing ready. Now, you can hear that it's starting to make noises because it's had one hell of a warming fire in it last night, but we're going to go through the checks as you would any day on a steam engine. First, we'll make sure the regulator is shut. Then we'll make sure that the reverser is in mid-gear and the cylinder drains down here are open. Then we'll come across and make sure the handbrake is definitely on, and then we'll see if there's any water in the gauge by turning this back on, and that is full of water. So that's everything safe here, so it's now time to have a look in the box. So we take the baffle plate out so we can have a good look inside the box. So we're checking to make sure there's nothing wet in here, all the corners are good, and the physical plugs are okay. So content with everything, have to put this pain in the backside thing back inside the firebox and try not to lose it, because that will be a bad day. Come on. There we go. Oh. Shut the doors to keep what heat's left in there. And now we need to go outside and check the smoke box. And by the sounds of it, it's just started to rain. The 5600 is a strange breed of locomotive. I know of no other steam engine in the world that in order to access the smoke box, you have to have a specially customised board to rest across the front buffers with a cutout for the vacuum pipe just so you can get to the smoke box door. Every other engine has got the smoke box door far back enough and enough of the frames coming forward that you can access it without this just abomination of a just why? Anyway, having found the board and installed it, we can open up this, pull this and open up the door, which reveals to us the smoke box, which is pretty good. We're looking for anything that's wet, any signs of leakages, any unusual patterns in the ash. And the superheater header looks fine, the tubes all look fine. The wash-up plug, I can see there, that's fine. That's all dry. There's a little bit of ash in there, but obviously they cleaned it out for us especially. So as they've cleaned it out, that means I can now shut this up and we can go light ourselves a fire and get on with things.
And as ever, the first thing to do was to go and find some combustible material that we could light a fire with, and then transfer it to the footplate.
As with any fire, it's important to make sure that your wood is placed carefully, with consideration and with absolute planning. Just throwing the wood in, higgledy-piggledy, a good fire will not make. I'm going to need some more wood. That's done nothing. Having gone and found several more barrelfuls of wood, I'm finally ready to actually light my fire. So I've got some rags, coated in paraffin, and it's time to set fire to them and light our fire. With the fire caught and burning well and the light slowly starting to break its way through, it's time to begin the real preparation. And I start this with some trepidation because me and this thing, well, we've got history. I've done this all before. When I was a volunteer at the Nene Valley Railway, I've oiled this up. And as a result, this is the example when I'm asked of poor design. This machine here is terrible. You'll notice that there is no motion on the outside save the coupling rods. Everything else, the big ends, the valve gear, all the rods, it's all inside. And that means that if you are a person of similar dimensions to me, there's not really room for you to go underneath. And this is that example of something that is a pain to oil up. It is absolutely terrible. And there is one notable change between doing this at the Nene Valley and doing it here at Telford. And that is the rather notable absence of a pit, because there isn't one. Now, I struggle to do this with a pit. And I'm not really sure how I'm going to do it without. There's going to have to be some kind of magic involved to get me, well, in there. I'm not really sure what was going on in the drafting office when they designed this machine, but obviously somebody had been really upset by an engine driver, and this was just a result to spite them, because there is no way this would have been done with a clean conscience. It's just, I think it's worse having done it before. I know what I'm in for. I'd rather be going into this going, it's probably not that bad. Because it is. It's just, it's hateful. It's so hateful, it kind of takes the edge off being on a steam engine. It's just, It starts off not too bad because you've got the coupling rods on the outside and they're all rather accessible. And then, so that's one done with a little bit of oil on the outside just to protect that for future generations. And now on to the next. Again, remains fairly simple and not too bad. It's just fill up this one here, like so. And with that done, we just put a tiny bit in the divot here. And finally, we up this one here. Now, obviously, I have to repeat this process over on the other side, but I'm not going to bother to show you that because it's identical. With the coupling rods complete, we have to reach inside. Now, luckily, we stopped this in the right position so that I can reach through the spokes to get to the rear axle box lubricator in here for the pony. If we stopped in the wrong position, you can't do this. And replacing the cork there completes lubrication on this side at ground level. So now it's time to go up a floor. Clambering up onto the first floor, we have this lubricator across here, which feeds the front axle box. Next up, while I'm here, this is the lubricator for the vac pump. So undo this and fill this little jobby up. It's all the way over there. Still, while I'm here, well, the tanks are full. Now we're in position. Let's do the axle box, which has been so nicely placed here for the centre driving wheels. So obviously I've got to do this again on the other side, but I'm not going to show you that because it's identical. Next, I've got an option. There's a couple of lubricators in the cab, or I can just get on with going underneath.
But first, I need to just start building up my fire with coal.
Returning to the cab, there are two lubricators for the rear driving wheels. One is just on the wall there, and this side is hidden underneath the reverser because, well, why wouldn't it be hidden somewhere? It's just a silly, inaccessible place. With that one done, it's time to move on to this piece of absolute magic. This is the Magic Hydrostatic Lubricator, and it works on just forces we don't understand. I mean, we do understand it. That's how it works. You know, you can't build it if you don't understand how it works. But basically, these across here are the settings for how fast this dispenses oil. So as we're going along, we'll get a drip coming out of here, and you basically want 1 drip a minute. I am not touching any of these settings at all. We're just going to leave those alone. What we're going to do is drain this, put some more oil in, and just assume it's been set up right and leave it alone, because this thing is the work of the devil. When they work, they're brilliant. When they don't, well, it's time to sell your soul. So with this, all we have to do to start off with is undo the top of the lubricator here, spin this off, and with that off, it's just a matter of coming down here and draining off all of the water that's left over from condensation from the steam that has been forcing this through. Once that starts running as just oil like that, we can shut that down, get our oil can and chuck some more oil into there like so, and then it's just a matter of putting the lid back on. So that completes the lubrication, apart from going inside. I've put that off for as long as I can. Here we go. Well, I couldn't come up with any excuses to put this off any longer. It's time to start whatever this is. The motion on the inside, which has just... Here we go then. So we start off, I've got our oiler points here. Then over here, this feeds the valve spindles themselves, and then I need to reach down here to open up the top here for the first one on top of the slide bars, which is just going to be accessed like that. So you might be thinking, Lawrie, that's not so bad. Oh, my dear viewer, we haven't even started. Right, now we need to swing ourselves into here. So reaching in here, we have these again on top of the slide bars, which will just dribble down on top of those, and then the other one that's here. Now, because of where the engine stopped, we've got the lubricators for the crosshead itself, so there are 4 of these, and of which I can access 2 of them without it being exceedingly difficult. There's that one, and then over here on my side there's another. The rest of them, the other 2, are behind the side of the frame over here, so that means it's time to clamber deeper inside the engine. Oh yes, what a wonderful bit of design this is. Oh god, gonna have to lose my hat. Oh, why? Who hurt you? Who made you hate engine drivers? Oh, boys who had to, oh, the hat's gone. Why is this so awful? Come back, oil can. Oh, why? Why is this like this? Why did I agree to come and film this? So we put top links here. Just take a bit of oil, put the cork back in there, like so, and now we can move across and oil up this one here. And finally, while we're in this position, we can just get to the reverse across shaft lubricator over here, like that. Great. And then just down here, I've got to do the lubricator for the vacuum pump, which is simple. So I've got to get it in here to the die block in there, so get that a good coating of oil. And then we've got the expansion link to do. Like that. And then finally tucked back here. And that takes the motion off the rods. Like that. So I've got to do the ones on the other side, but that is the motion complete. So as I come out, I've just got to do one bit here, one linkage there, and just one over here on the sanding mechanism. And now it's time to do the thing I really don't want to do. So here we are with the moment that you've all been waiting for. It's time to go underneath, and I have tried to put this off. I've offered to clean the whole locomotive. I've offered to do the brass. I've offered to make them all a cup of tea. And they've said, no, you've got to go underneath and oil up. In fact, the driver who's roster today is overjoyed that I'm here doing this because it means he doesn't have to go under and deal with this poxy infernal machine. So enough stalling. Going under. Oh my. Oh no. Oh no. Why is... A pit would be so much better. Right, let's do that, and then, well, this is just the absolute worst. So I'm now in position, able to access the eccentrics across here and the big end down there. So we take off this one and we take off this one like so, find my oil can, and then we can fill this up. This is the single worst splitter design I have ever come across, because I can't get on top of the motion to see what's going on. That one's full, and now that one's full. And now I've got to try and somehow work my way over to these ones, but I've done two. That's enough for you to see. Next, it's the top of the expansion link, so I take the cork out, and then because of the position and everything, I can't see if it's full or not, so it's just going to be a tip and pour some oil in until it dribbles down on top of me. Oh, like that. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So that's full. And now, moving on to this one down here. Then the bottom expansion link is there. This one I at least can see. Fill that up with oil. Oh, it's gone everywhere. I can't even get the cork back in. And then, obviously I've got to do that again on the other side, but, while we're here. When in Rome, you're in... Where did you go, cork? Where did you go? No. I'll just do this one while we're here, and then I'll go find what I've done with that cork. Right, that's gone there, that's good. And now the cork. The worst thing about dropping a cork isn't the shame or the fact that you're a poor engineman that you can't hold on to a cork. It's the fact that now I've recovered it from underneath the engine, I now need to wedge myself back into space, thus to be able to refit it. Oh my god! Why is this like this?
And having confirmed that this is indeed the worst locomotive I have ever had the misfortune to oil up, prep was complete. And then it was time to find out if all the anguish and hard work had been worth it, and for that we had to find a train. And having found a train, we coupled up, and then it was my turn to have a go.
And so here we go. Oi. Thank you. The first thing you get as you pull away with this is just the immense sense of power. This is just a completely different class of engine to anything that I've featured on the channel before. It's a proper mainline engine. This isn't meant for going around a yard. This is meant for going out and actually running a service and doing something proper. And you get that straight from the go. Just the sheer size of it, the size of the back head, the way that it feels is just big engine. And it is exciting. This regulator is fantastic. The slightest movement is the difference between big noise and just maintaining. It's just amazing. It's also Western, which means I have 2 whistles, which is frankly the best thing anyone has ever done for a steam engine. We're now approaching the tunnel, and that means, well, tunnel noises. It is just phenomenal noise. It's beautifully in time. You wouldn't know that this is a 100-year-old locomotive. It sounds and feels far too good. That is a wonderful, wonderful part. And we are not stressing this at all with 2 coaches and a brake van. It's almost like it's light engine. It's so unbothered. It makes you realise just how capable these machines were. Because as well we've got the training wheels underneath the cab, it rides really well. You don't feel anything on the track. I mean, the track here at Telford could be really good, but you really don't feel anything. The locomotive just glides along. It is a work of art, and I really mean that. Then for me as well to come back and be on this so many years after I was first on it, it's wonderful to return to it and actually get another go and to revisit an old friend. Now obviously my visibility looking forward is, well, there is a massive great firebox, the chimney and the boiler in the way, so anything could happen on the other side. I am very much dependent on my firemen to keep a good eye out as we go along. But apart from that, it's pretty good. The biggest problem with the Western engine is that in order to use the brake, I've got to be in the cab. As soon as I start going out here, I'm really on the edge of what I can reach. The other thing that's nice is just how big this cab is. There's enough room to move around. The downside, however, is the fact in order to look out the front like this, I'm kind of bent at this weird S-bend angle over the top of the reverser. It's a very strange and weird seating system. The most alarming bit for me is this here as we come down here, because the railway drops down in 1 in 40, which is pretty steep by railway turns, and then comes into the platform and then the line stops. So it's very important just to keep control of everything and just nice and gently. Railways like doing nice and slowly. Big fast changes are not advised. This really does make the big boy engine noises. It's just, that exhaust is so intoxicating. It's such an amazing sound. I want to do more with this. I want to see what it's capable of. I'm opening the regulator such a tiny amount, and it's just walking away. Now, I think that this is 100 years old. It doesn't feel like a 100-year-old machine. It just doesn't seem like it's possible for it to be that old, because it's so well held together. An engine that comes towards the end of its ticket, you normally think, yeah, it's getting a bit tired, it's getting a bit, you feel it's getting old. But this thing, not at all. This thing just feels like it's almost new out of the box. It's a rarity to drive an engine that's towards the end of its ticket that just feels this good. It's absolutely phenomenal. May be apparent, but I am loving it. It's so nice to come back and be reacquainted with it. And it's something very nice as well about being on a Great Western engine with this familiar back edge. You know where everything is, you know how it all works. And you just hop on and go, yep, that's everything. There's no need to reorientate yourself with it because you know how it's all laid out. It is the beauty of Great Western standardisation. It's a fantastic idea. You can drive one Western engine, you can drive them all because it's the same principle. It's just brilliant. This thing is phenomenal. It's genuinely phenomenal, and the guys here at the railway should be so proud of it because it's an amazing asset to have. And of course, it is so absolutely entwined with the railway itself. Will there be a railway without this here? Well, who knows? It's so nice to have the engine that was part of the reason there is a heritage railway here, actually here running on the railway. And for me, it feels so special to actually be on a big engine, doing things with a big engine, actually operating. It's just, it's brilliant. I absolutely love this. I love the sound. I love the feel of power. I just want to do more with it. I want to see what it's capable of. I want to take this to Wales. I want to go charging up the side of a mountain with a load of trucks and just see what happens if we put it in second valve, because that would be something else entirely. Can you imagine just the sheer... it must have been incredible to have one of these and actually work it hard. I've often said that the Austerity is one of my favourite steam locomotives of all time, but this is a close second. It's just, I don't think I've ever driven a locomotive before that just radiates power in such a way that this does. It's just, I don't have the words for it. It's monstrous almost. Just that sense of, I don't think anybody's ever fully found out what these will do, because it's just so insanely powerful. And also, although it is ungainly, I really like how these things look. They've got a real character to them. It's certainly a very iconic look. I think it's my biggest problem with this full stop, is I just want to do more. I want to do more, I want to go further. This has been an unfair tasting. This has been a sample of what it could do, but it's been taken away from me before I could really test it and to feel what it's capable of. It's a tease. That's what this engine is. It's a tease. And I just want more. And with that brings us to the end of the day here at the Telford Railway on this absolutely spectacular Centurion machine. I've absolutely loved every moment on it, and to be out on a proper full-size Great Western engine has been magical. In fact, the only thing is I wish I could take it for further and take more with it. So it's been brilliant. Now remember, this thing is going to officially celebrate its birthday on the 4th of May next year, Star Wars Day. There's going to be a special guest with Pete Waterman, the reopening of the tramway over there, and this thing doing stuff. And then have a look at the link over there to help support this thing as it goes into its 10-year overhaul, so it can continue bringing joy in the future. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you have enjoyed this, click over there for another review or down there for something else. Giraffe.